always hated weddings. Not because of the flowers or the forced smiles, but because they magnified everything people pretended not to feel. At a wedding, there's nowhere to hide from truth. Not under the white lace, not behind the champagne, flutes. And certainly not by the lake where my sister married the man our father approved of more than he ever approved of me. The sun had started to lower behind the trees, casting a warm gold across the water and making the string lights shimmer above the tables. My sister Lily looked stunning, effortless in her pearl-stitched gown, radiant and adored. I stood off to the side in my navy blue dress, the one I'd chosen carefully because it was my mother's favorite color. She wasn't here to see it, of course, but wearing it made me feel like I could breathe. The applause was fading after the newlyweds' first kiss when I noticed him walking toward me. My father, tall, iron-backed, still wearing the same cologne he did when I was a child, the one that smelled like sharp pine and cold aftershave. A scent that used to mean safety. Now it meant warning. His face was tight, his eyes hard. He didn't smile. He never smiled at me unless someone else was watching. "Clara," he said, voice like gravel. "I told you not to wear that dress." I blinked. "What?" "You're doing this again. Making it about you." His voice was low, but each word was a blade. "Don't pretend you don't know what you're doing." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My fingers clenched around the stem of my empty champagne glass. "Dad, I'm not..." The slap came before I could finish. Open palm, across my cheek, loud enough to slice the music and still the laughter. Gasps. A hush so thick it felt like a hand pressing over the entire reception. Time slowed. I felt the sting radiate across my skin, my ears ringing. But I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Not because I was brave, but because I had known, somehow, this moment would come. He was scared. I saw it in the way his mouth twitched, in the tremor of his fingertips as he stepped back, suddenly aware of the silence swallowing the crowd. He wasn't angry because I'd worn the wrong color. He was angry because he thought I might speak. And he was right. I reached into my clutch with hands that had stopped shaking hours ago, pulled out a small black flash drive. It was warm from being pressed against my skin all evening. Tucked into the lining of my dress like a secret, I held it up, not high, not dramatic, just enough that he could see. "This isn't about the dress," I said, loud enough for him, but calm enough for everyone. His face drained of color. "Clara, don't..." But I'd already turned. The flash drive felt heavier now. Not with fear, but with purpose. I walked through the crowd, guests parting as if I carried fire in my palms. I spotted the event coordinator standing by the sound booth. She looked confused, until she saw my cheek. "Can you play this?" I asked softly, handing her the drive. "What's on it?" she whispered. "The truth." Behind me, I heard my father's voice rise, heard my sister call out my name, panic in her tone, but I didn't stop. I just stood still, in the middle of the reception floor, under the lights, facing the big screen behind the stage. This wasn't just a wedding. This was the reckoning, and I was done being quiet. Before the slap, before the flash drive, before the silence fell over that golden wedding lawn, I was the good daughter. Not the favorite. That was always Lily, with her effortless charm and effortless beauty. But the reliable one. The one who stayed. The one who didn't cause trouble. The one who tucked her dreams away like delicate linens no one was allowed to touch. When Mom got sick, it wasn't even a conversation. I moved back into the old house without being asked. I gave up a promotion at the firm, traded in a corner office with a skyline view for a cramped bedroom with peeling paint and nights filled with the sound of breathing machines. I did it because it was right. Because someone had to. Lily sent flowers. Dad gave orders. And I gave up. Thomas came into my life during that time. He was quiet, kind. A nurse who stayed late to check on my mom, who brought me coffee without asking how I took it. He listened. He didn't try to fix me, just held space for the silence I didn't have words for. When he asked me out for the first time, I remember blushing like a schoolgirl. I wore a soft pink blouse and my mother's perfume, amber and gardenia, warm like memories. I hadn't worn it in years. "You smell like comfort," Thomas whispered that night. And I nearly cried at how deeply I'd missed being seen. But when I told my father, his reaction was instant, sharp. "He'll take from you, Clara. Men like that always do." No congratulations, no questions, just the same bitterness dressed in concern. I smiled through it. I always did. But something inside me dimmed. Later, when I told him about my promotion at work, heading a legal project for a nonprofit he used to praise, he waved it off like a grocery list. "That's not real success," he said. "You're still just someone else's assistant." I wasn't. I had built that project from the ground up. My name was printed on federal grant contracts. I had made something. But it didn't matter. Not to him. He called Lily my little star, even when she crashed her car into a mailbox and blamed the sun. But when I bought my own used Honda with saved-up bonuses, he looked out the window and said, "You could have asked me for help." Help. That was the word he used to erase every step I took alone. The truth is, I started shrinking to survive. I became someone smaller, quieter, more agreeable. It felt easier than arguing. Easier than watching that flash of disdain flicker across his face every time I dared to shine. Even Thomas noticed. "You disappear when he's around," he said. "Once, like someone turns down your volume." I brushed it off, but he was right. I was turning myself down, day by day, until I barely existed in my own skin. Then Mom died. It happened on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning. Her hands in mine, the same way they were when I was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. She whispered something soft, but I never heard it. Because my father chose that exact moment to start speaking. A eulogy, unsolicited, spoken in the hospital room while the machines were still beeping, as if he'd rehearsed it for months. I remember hating him then. Not for his words, but for stealing that final second from me. For needing to be the one heard, even in her last breath. At the funeral, I wore her favorite navy blue shawl. I didn't cry. Not once. People called me strong, brave. I wasn't. I was numb. And no one saw the woman unraveling quietly inside, her tidy clothes, holding everyone else's grief like an overstuffed purse. That was the first time I started dreaming of leaving. Of disappearing, not out of pain, but out of preservation. I stayed for Lily's sake. She was planning her engagement by then. And Dad? He became more unpredictable, less cruel in words, more manipulative in tone. He praised me when I kept quiet, punished me with distance when I didn't, and like clockwork, I played my part. I never told Thomas how badly it affected me. I never told him I sometimes stared at my reflection and didn't recognize the woman blinking back. She looked like me, but dimmer, duller, faded from too many washes. Eventually he left, not angrily, just tired. And I didn't chase him, because I didn't think I deserved someone who loved me fully when I couldn't even love myself in fragments. People thought I was strong. But they didn't see what I gave up to look like I had it all together. Disappeared long before the slap. And I was only just beginning to realize how much of my life had been shaped not by my choices, but by my silence. It happened on a Wednesday evening, 3 days before the wedding. Lily had insisted I come by the venue to help finalize seating charts. I told her I was tired, but she guilted me the way only younger sisters can. "Just come for an hour, Clara. Please." Her voice still carried that edge of entitlement wrapped in sweetness. I gave in. The ballroom smelled like cut roses and fake anticipation. White linen everywhere, polished silver, tall centerpieces like frozen fireworks. I walked in and felt out of place, like I'd stepped into someone else's fantasy and was being asked to arrange the shadows. Dad was already there, of course, seated at the head table as if he owned the place. He was sipping black coffee, scrolling, through his phone with that same furrowed brow he wore like armor. He barely looked up when I walked in. "You're late," he muttered. I didn't answer. I just took my seat next to Lily and began the work. Names, napkins, flower types. I tried to focus, tried to pretend none of it stung. But the ache had a heartbeat now. Pulsing in my throat, it was when we were packing up that I saw it. Dad's phone, left on the table beside his empty coffee cup. The screen buzzed twice, then a third time. Out of habit. God, it was just habit. I picked it up to silence it. But something in the preview stopped me cold. A message from Helen L. "Missed. You last night. Still thinking about that sunset in Asheville. Helen Langford. My old mentor. A woman I once admired. The same woman who had coached me through my first legal internship, who had dinner with my family when I graduated, who kissed my mother on the cheek and called her Grace in human form. My hands trembled. My heart began to pound, not from suspicion, but from the certainty that something had always been off. I opened the phone. The code was the same as always. My sister's birthday, 11:02. He had never even changed it. What I found was worse than I could have imagined, not just texts, but photos, voice messages, videos of him and Helen at lake houses, business conferences, dinners, her laughing at inside jokes, him calling her Sunbeam, dates going back nearly 7 years. That was the year Mom was diagnosed. That was the year I gave up my job, my life, to care for her. And he was with her. My stomach turned to stone. And then I found the emails, bank statements, transfers to Helen's consulting business, large amounts, withdrawals from the savings account I'd trusted him to manage, the one left behind in both our names when Mom passed. He'd used my money. I don't remember sitting down. Just the way the chair's cushion swallowed me, how small I suddenly felt in that giant ballroom. I saw everything in flashes. My mom's last night, his cold sermons, his disapproval of Thomas, the missing $6,000 I once assumed I'd miscalculated, the gaslighting, the dismissal, the way he praised Lily's laziness, but called my ambition ungrateful. My whole life unraveled in that screen. I had been mourning a man who was never grieving. And then came the voice memo. His voice, breathy, warm. "You're the only one who truly gets me. Clara's like her mother. Too serious. Too moral. Always judging." I nearly dropped the phone. My face went hot, then cold. My body felt hollow and too full at once. Like every truth I'd ever known had been scrubbed raw. I heard Lily calling from the hallway. "Clara, you coming?" I locked the phone, placed it back exactly where he left it, stood up like nothing had happened, and walked outside, down to the edge of the empty parking lot, where the air smelled of lilacs and gasoline. I sat on the curb and sobbed, not polite tears, ugly, choking grief that sounded like betrayal and tasted like copper in my throat. I cried for my mother, for myself, for the life I let him steal in tiny pieces, for all the times I thought I was too sensitive, Too serious. Too much. I don't know how long I sat there. Time collapsed. At some point, I pulled out my phone and began taking screenshots. I sent them to a secure email I hadn't used in years, created a folder, labeled it, "For when I meet." Ready. I wasn't ready yet, but I would be. That night, back at my apartment, I stood in front of my mirror and didn't look away. I touched the fading bruise on my wrist from bumping it on his car door the week before. The same one he told me I was being dramatic about, and I remembered Thomas's words. You disappear around him. Not anymore. I picked up the navy dress hanging on my closet door, the one I planned to wear to the wedding. It still carried the scent of my mother's perfume. I pressed it to my chest, whispered into the fabric. I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't know. But now I did, and I wasn't going to stay quiet. I didn't pack much, just a weekend bag, my mother's perfume, and the navy dress still carrying, her scent like a second skin. By the time I hit the highway, the sun was beginning to sink into the horizon. I drove without music, without calls, just the sound of tires on asphalt and the shallow rhythm of my own breath. I don't remember crying. Not then. But my throat ached from all the things I wasn't saying. The lake house had been empty for years. My grandmother's cottage, a small, weathered place just beyond the tree line, where wind chimes still hung from the porch like ghosts humming lullabies. It smelled like old cedar and sandalwood, the scent of my childhood summers, when life was simple and my father's voice couldn't reach me. I dropped my keys onto the table and just stood there. The silence felt thick, like the house had been holding its breath all this time. And then I broke. It wasn't a scream or a sob, just a slow collapse. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged like a child, and cried into my palms until the skin on my face stung. I don't know how long I stayed there. But when I finally stood, I went to the bookshelf, still filled with yellowed paperbacks and teacups, and found what I hadn't known I was looking for. A small wooden box, tucked behind a row of cookbooks. Inside it was the locket, oval, silver, the hinge a little rusted. I opened it with careful fingers, and there we were. Me and Mom, at the lakeside dock, our foreheads pressed together in a sunlit smile. I held it to my chest and whispered, I miss you. That night, I wrote a letter to her, then another, and another. I didn't send them anywhere, just folded them neatly and tucked them into a ceramic bowl on the windowsill, a bowl she once used to hold plums. The days passed quietly, mornings filled with mist and birdsong, afternoons with warm tea and open windows. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. Pages filled quickly, not with plans or pain, but questions. Who am I if I stop pleasing everyone? What do I want now, truly? The answers didn't come quickly, but the questions, at least, were mine. On the third day, I wandered into town. It was a sleepy place, all brick sidewalks and crooked shutters. I found a small tea shop tucked between a bookstore and a gallery. The sign read, Marion's Remedies and Teas. Inside, the Calm. Air smelled of dried lavender and citrus. Warm, earthy, safe. She was behind the counter, gray hair tied back, wire-rimmed glasses perched low on her nose. You look like someone carrying too much, she said gently, not unkindly. I smiled. That obvious? She poured me a blend of chamomile, rose, and something that tasted like hope. Over the next few days, I kept going back. She never asked too many questions, just told me stories in that way women do when they're offering pieces of themselves without asking for anything. In return, she told me about her ex-husband, how he made her feel small, how she stayed too long, how she one day woke up and didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. "He didn't hit me," she said, "but he erased me, one sentence at a time." I nodded. Mine used silence, shame, disappointment. She didn't flinch, just handed me a small jar. "Lemon balm, for your nerves." Marion didn't fix me. She didn't try, but she helped me feel visible. And that, I realized, was healing in itself. On a cool morning just before dawn, I took a walk along the lake path behind the house. Dew clung to the grass like the air was trying to hold itself together. I wore my mother's old cardigan. The locket hung heavy against my collarbone. I stood at the dock where the photo in the locket had been taken. The boards creaked underfoot, and I said it, aloud. "He doesn't get to define me anymore." The words felt foreign, but they were mine, and once spoken, they became real. A breeze passed, warm and fragrant, as if the trees themselves had been waiting for that release. I didn't have all the answers, but I had something better. I had the beginnings of a voice I thought I'd lost. Healing didn't come all at once. It never does. It arrived in fragments, like tiny petals floating in tea. Quiet, slow, almost imperceptible. But still, it came. Each morning at the lake house, I would brew a pot of Marion's herbal blends, lemon balm, rose hips, honey. She said they were for nerves, but I think they were also for the heart. I'd sit by the window with my notebook open, the locket warm against my skin, and begin cataloging the evidence, piece by piece, message by message, transfer by transfer. There was so much. I hadn't realized how deep his trail ran until I laid it out in front of me like a timeline of betrayal. 7 years. That's how long the affair had lasted, nearly to the day my mother first fell ill. I started naming the files by dates and symbols. April 2017. Asheville trip photo. May 2020. Voice note. Sunbeam. Joint account. Wire transfer. H. Langford. Statements. There was something empowering about turning chaos into order. I wasn't a lawyer, not officially, but I knew enough from my nonprofit work to structure a digital case. And this was damning. Marion helped me with the formatting. She had once worked in communications. "Truth," she said, "needs clarity. Let it speak for itself." We recorded a soft voiceover for the opening, just 30 seconds. My voice, clear but quiet. This is what silence buys. This is what I paid for. With obedience, with sacrifice, with every piece of myself, I was told to shrink. But I am not invisible anymore, and neither is he. When I played it back for the first time, my hands didn't shake. The locket hung from my neck as I stared at the export bar crawling across the screen. And when it was done, I slipped the file onto a small black flash drive. Smooth, light, unassuming. It fit perfectly in the palm of my hand. 2 days before the wedding, I drove back to the city. Not because I owed anyone anything, but because there are stories you have to finish yourself. My phone lit up with missed calls the moment I re-entered cell range. 5 from Dad, 3 from Lily. A text from his assistant about rehearsal dinner details. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I pulled into the parking lot of a boutique downtown. The windows were filled with soft silks, muted blues, and delicate embroidery. Inside, I found the dress almost immediately. It was navy, my mother's favorite. Long sleeves, modest neckline. A fabric that shimmered like still water when it moved. I tried it on and looked in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was dressing for approval. I was dressing for presence, for memory, for power. The clerk complimented the fit. I nodded and said, "It's for my sister's wedding." She smiled. "You'll look radiant." I didn't say thank you. I just nodded, knowing it wasn't about the dress. The morning of the wedding was warm and windless. I wore the navy dress, the locket, my mother's perfume. I pinned my hair the way she used to wear hers when she read bedtime stories to us on the porch. Soft waves, tucked back, at the ears. I didn't need glamour. I needed to feel like me. I slipped the flash drive into a pocket sewn into the lining of my clutch. I didn't need to rehearse. I knew the truth by heart. When I arrived at the venue, everything looked too perfect. Rows of white chairs faced the lake. Floating candles drifted in tall glass vases. Lily stood radiant near the archway, her back to me. I stayed out of view. I wasn't there for the ceremony. I was there for the moment after. Inside the reception tent, the air was cool with controlled humidity. I scanned the tech booth near the DJ, just as I'd planned. A screen, a laptop, an HDMI cable within reach. I walked toward it slowly, purposefully, like a woman who finally remembered her worth. The event coordinator turned as I approached. She blinked at the sight of my cheek, still faintly marked by the bruise from earlier, that week. "Can I help you?" she asked. I reached into my clutch, pulling out the flash drive. "Can you play this when I give the signal?" I asked, voice even. "What is it?" she asked. "The truth," I said. She hesitated, but something in my tone, something in my eyes maybe, made her nod. I slipped into the crowd unnoticed, waited, watched, and then I saw him. My father, raising a glass for his wedding toast. Guests clapping, Lily beaming beside her new husband. The music low, the tension light. I stepped forward, heels clicking softly across the wooden floor. He saw me, and in that instant, I saw his face change. He knew. I lifted my hand, not with malice, not with drama, just a gentle signal to the coordinator. The screen behind the stage flickered to life, and the silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. There was a single beat of static before the screen flickered on. The wedding reception stood frozen in time, the kind of stillness that only comes right before the unraveling of something beautifully fake. Crystal clinked. Forks paused. Mid-air, Lily turned slowly, her veil catching the golden light like a trapped flame, and then his voice filled the room. "You're the only one who truly gets me. Clara's like her mother, too serious, too moral, always judging." I stood just off, to the side of the dance floor, the locket warm against my collarbone, fingers still curled loosely around the clutch. No one spoke. No one breathed. The footage shifted. A selfie of my father and Helen in a hotel room, her lipstick on his collar. Him smiling in a way I'd never seen him smile with us. Then, wire transfer details. $6,200. Memo. Consulting. HL. A photo of Helen's luxury cottage. A time-stamped voice message of him laughing. She still thinks I'm managing her savings. God, she's so naive. The final clip was mine. My voice, steady, from the recording Marion helped me narrate. This is what silence buys. This is what I paid for, and this is what I'm leaving behind. The screen cut to black. Nobody clapped. Nobody needed to. Because the silence afterward said everything. I turned to look at him. He stood by the head table, one hand still holding his champagne flute like it might shield him from the collapse. His face was pale, sweat collecting at his hairline. He didn't say a word. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked so small. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked, slow, purposeful, across the dance floor, heels pressing gently into the wood. The air around me felt lighter somehow, like the weight I'd carried for years had been passed back to its rightful owner. I kept walking, past the gasps, past the flashing cameras, past Lily's wide, stunned eyes. I heard someone whisper, "Is that his daughter?" And someone else say, "What the hell did we just see?" But I didn't stop. My heels crunched softly on the gravel path as I made my way toward the lake. The light had shifted. Golden hour was nearly gone. The sky was bleeding into lavender and silver, and the trees along the shoreline whispered like old women sharing secrets. I stood at the water's edge, hands at my sides, eyes fixed on the still surface. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. It wasn't about revenge. It had never been about revenge. It was about truth, about the kind of justice that doesn't scream. It simply stands up. I didn't hear Lily approach, but I knew it was her from the way the gravel shifted, cautious, hesitant, not yet angry. She stood beside me without speaking at first. Her veil was gone, her arms crossed tightly over her bodice, shoulders still. "He looked like a stranger," she said finally. I nodded. "He always did. You just couldn't see it." She looked at me. Her eyes were rimmed in red. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I let out a breath. "Because I wanted you to have the chance to love him without question. I never got that." Silence again. Then her voice broke. "I believed everything he said about you." "I know. I thought you were bitter, that you just couldn't let go of things." "I was bitter," I admitted, "but not for the reasons he told you." She looked out at the lake, her eyes glassy. "What happens now?" "I don't know," I said. "But it's yours to figure out." I turned toward her, reaching into my pocket. I pressed the locket into her hand. "Mom would have wanted you to have this when you're ready to see her clearly." She stared down at it. I didn't wait for a thank you. I drove back to the lake house that night. The road was quiet, moonlight threading through the trees like silver ribbon. I rolled the windows down, let the air kiss my skin, let the sound of tires hum like lullabies. Somewhere along the way, I laughed. Not loud, just soft from deep inside. A sound I hadn't made in years. At the cottage, I hung the dress on the back of the bedroom door. I opened all the windows and let the cool air drift in. The stars above were scattered and unbothered. I lit a candle, poured a cup of Marian's rose lavender blend. Then, slowly, gently, I placed a hand to my heart and whispered, "You did it." There was no applause, no dramatic ending, just peace, and for the first time in my life, that was more than enough.